But when it comes to Mark Meadows, this seems very important. When it comes to Mark Meadows, we also today got a brand new, previously unheard assertion from his top deputy, Cassidy Hutchinson, about what Mark Meadows did around this time and why he did it. Now, we don't know why they held this piece of Cassidy Hutchinson testimony until today, when we've heard so much from her in previous hearings, both on tape and in live testimony. But it is possible that the investigators on the January 6th committee have held this back until today.
Right now, we do have some breaking news to get to. Former President Donald Trump posted on his Truth social account that he expects to be arrested on Tuesday. This comes as a New York prosecutor is viewing charges in a case where hush money was paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 presidential elections. Trump is urging his followers to protest. New York law enforcement officials have been making security preparations in case Trump is indicted. ABC News has not verified the claims, and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has not commented about the post or possible arrest.
Okay, so what I'm about to tell you is absolutely massive, and it represents the biggest betrayal in Trump's inner circle yet. Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, the guy who was with Trump every single day in the White House, who saw everything, who was in every meeting, who knew all the plans, he just flipped. He's cooperating with prosecutors. He's providing testimony. He's handing over documents. And what he's revealing is devastating. We're talking about detailed, firsthand accounts of Trump, orchestrating a plot to overturn the 2020 election. We're talking about documentary evidence showing Trump knew his fraud claims were false, but pushed them anyway. We're talking about meeting notes and text messages that tie Trump directly to the fake elector scheme and the pressure campaign against Mike Pence. This is the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream about. An insider who was there for everything, who has the receipts, who can testify about what Trump said and did in private meetings, and Capitol Hill is absolutely erupting because everyone understands what this means. This is the game changer. This is the evidence that makes prosecution not just possible, but inevitable. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The chief of staff is obviously the most loyal person to the president. They're the closest person in many ways to the president. But I cannot explain Mark Meadows in my own mind. Mm-hmm. Well, this is guy, he's like a garden variety birther tea partier congressman from North Carolina. He's not like a Ted Cruz who like styles himself as some sort of 1776 like redux revolutionary. Like he's just some guy who becomes chief of staff. And why is he willing to risk jail? I mean, he got like $1 million for his PAC from the slush fund. $1 million ain't worth lying for the president of the United States and fomenting a coup. I cannot make it make sense in my mind.
So let me give you the context here, because you need to understand who Mark Meadows is and why his cooperation is such a big deal. Meadows wasn't just some random White House staffer. He was Trump's chief of staff. That's the top position in the White House after the president. The chief of staff controls access to the president, manages the White House operations, coordinates between different departments, is in virtually every important meeting, sees every important document, knows about every major decision. If you want to understand what a president is doing and why, you talk to the chief of staff, because they know everything. And Meadows was Trump's chief of staff during the most critical period, during the 2020 election, during the efforts to overturn the results during January 6th. He was there for all of it, saw all of it, participated in all of it, and now he's telling prosecutors everything he knows. This represents the ultimate betrayal from Trump's perspective, because Meadows was supposed to be loyal, was supposed to be one of the true believers who would never turn on Trump no matter what. And for a long time, that seemed accurate. Meadows defended Trump publicly, refused to cooperate with congressional investigations, stood by Trump even as other former officials started distancing themselves. But something changed. Maybe it was the weight of the evidence against him. Maybe it was prosecutors threatening him with serious charges. Maybe it was his lawyers convincing him that cooperation was his only option. Whatever the reason, Meadows made the calculation that saving himself was more important than protecting Trump. And now he's providing prosecutors with everything they need to build an airtight case. And what he's revealing is absolutely damning. According to reports about his testimony, Meadows has told prosecutors that Trump was repeatedly warned by his own advisors that there was no evidence of widespread election fraud, that White House lawyers, campaign lawyers, even Trump's own attorney general told him the election wasn't stolen, that the fraud claims were baseless, that he lost fair and square. But Trump didn't care. He kept pushing the stolen election narrative anyway, kept claiming fraud despite being told there wasn't any. That's not someone who genuinely believed the election was stolen. That's someone who knew the truth but lied about it anyway because the lie served his purposes. And Meadows can testify to all of that, can describe the meetings where Trump was told there was no fraud, can identify the people who warned Trump, can provide the timeline showing Trump knew the truth but pushed false claims anyway. But it gets worse. Meadows has also testified about Trump's direct involvement in the fake elector scheme. This is the plot where Trump's team created alternate slates of electors in states Biden won. These fake electors would claim they were the real electors and try to get Congress to count their votes instead of the actual electoral votes. It's fraud. It's conspiracy. It's attempting to overturn a legitimate election through deception. And according to Meadows, Trump wasn't just aware of this scheme, he was actively involved in it, was in meetings discussing it, was approving memos about it, was directing his team to coordinate with Giuliani and other lawyers working on the fake elector plan. Meadows can provide chapter and verse on Trump's involvement, can describe specific meetings, can identify who said what, can connect Trump directly to criminal conduct. And then there's the pressure campaign against Mike Pence. Meadows has testified about Trump's efforts to convince Pence to reject electoral votes during the January 6th certification, about the meetings where Trump pushed Pence, about the legal memos that claimed Pence had authority he didn't actually have, about Trump's anger when Pence refused to go along with the plan. All of this is firsthand testimony from someone who was in the room, who witnessed these conversations, who can describe Trump's state of mind and intent. That's gold for prosecutors, because intent is often the hardest thing to prove. You have to show the defendant knew what they were doing was wrong and did it anyway, and Meadows can provide that evidence, can testify that Trump knew he lost, knew the fraud claims were false, knew the fake elector plan was illegal, but pursued all of it anyway because he wanted to stay in power. The documentary evidence Meadows is providing makes this even more powerful. We're talking about White House memos, meeting notes, text messages, email chains, all showing Trump's involvement in these schemes, all tying him directly to criminal conduct. This isn't just Meadows' word against Trump's. This is documentary proof, evidence that can be shown to a jury. That corroborates Meadows' testimony. That makes the case ironclad. Legal experts are calling this a game changer because this is the kind of evidence that makes convictions inevitable. That removes any reasonable doubt. That shows Trump guilty beyond any question. Capitol Hill is erupting because everyone understands the implications. This is it. This is the moment when Trump's legal problems become insurmountable, when prosecution becomes certain, when accountability finally arrives. All right, so let's dig into what Meadows actually revealed and why it's so significant from both a legal and political perspective. Because there are layers here, multiple criminal schemes that Meadows has provided evidence about, multiple people who could face charges based on what he's told prosecutors, and multiple implications for how these cases move forward. So we need to talk about the specific revelations, the documentary evidence, the legal theories prosecutors can now pursue, and what this means for Trump and his co-conspirators. Because Meadows flipping isn't just about Trump, it's about everyone involved in these schemes, and his testimony could bring down dozens of people. Let's start with the false fraud claims. This might seem like just politics. Trump claiming the election was stolen even though it wasn't, but legally it becomes criminal when Trump knew the claims were false and used them to justify illegal actions. That's fraud. That's conspiracy. And Meadows can establish that Trump knew. According to his testimony, Trump was in meetings where advisors explicitly told him there was no evidence of widespread fraud, where they went through the allegations state by state and explained why each one was false, where they showed him that recounts confirmed Biden's victory, where they told him that even his own Justice Department couldn't find fraud that would change the outcome. Trump heard all of that, was told repeatedly by people he trusted that the election wasn't stolen, and he ignored them. Kept pushing the fraud narrative publicly, kept claiming he won, kept using those false claims to justify his efforts to overturn the results. That's criminal intent right there. Because once you know something is false, continuing to claim it's true in order to achieve an illegal goal is conspiracy, it's fraud. And Meadows can testify to Trump's knowledge, can describe the meetings, can identify the advisors who warned Trump, can provide a timeline showing when Trump knew what. And that timeline is crucial because it establishes that everything Trump did after being warned, every action he took to overturn the election after knowing his fraud claims were false, was done with criminal intent. He wasn't operating on mistaken belief. He was knowingly pursuing illegal goals based on lies he knew were lies. Now let's talk about the fake elector scheme, because this is where things get really serious. The basic idea was to create alternate slates of electors in states Biden won. These fake electors would meet, cast their votes for Trump, and send those votes to Congress. Then during the January 6th certification, Trump's team would try to create confusion about which electors were legitimate. Maybe they could get Congress to delay certification. Maybe they could get Mike Pence to reject the real electors and count the fake ones. Or maybe they could just create enough chaos that the certification couldn't happen and Trump could claim authority to stay in power. It's a convoluted plan, but it's also clearly illegal because these people weren't the real electors. They had no authority to cast electoral votes. Creating fake documents claiming they were electors is fraud. Submitting those fake documents to Congress is another crime. Conspiring to do all of this is conspiracy. And according to Meadows, Trump was directly involved. Meadows has testified about meetings where the fake elector plan was discussed, where Trump and his advisors talked about which states to target, where they coordinated with Rudy Giuliani and other lawyers who were organizing the fake electors on the ground, where Trump approved the strategy and directed his team to move forward with it. This is direct evidence of Trump's involvement, not speculation, not inference. Meadows saying I was in meetings where Trump discussed this plan and directed people to execute it. That's conspiracy. That's the kind of evidence that gets convictions. Because Meadows isn't some peripheral figure. He's the chief of staff testifying about what he personally witnessed. And Meadows has documents to back up his testimony. We're talking about White House memos discussing the fake elector strategy, meeting notes from gatherings where the plan was debated, text messages between Meadows and others coordinating the effort, email chains showing communication between the White House and lawyers working with fake electors in various states. All of this documentary evidence corroborates Meadows' testimony, shows this wasn't just idle conversation. This was an organized conspiracy that Trump was actively directing from the White House. And prosecutors now have all of that evidence, can present it to grand juries, can show it to trial juries, can use it to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Trump committed these crimes. The pressure campaign against Mike Pence is another major component of Meadows' testimony. In the days leading up to January 6th, Trump and his team were desperately trying to convince Pence that he had authority to reject electoral votes during the certification. They showed him legal memos arguing he had this power. They pressured him in private meetings. Trump even attacked Pence publicly to try to force him to comply. And according to Meadows, all of this was coordinated and deliberate. Trump knew what he was asking Pence to do was legally questionable at best. Had been told by White House lawyers that Pence didn't have authority to reject electoral votes. But Trump pushed anyway, because he thought if he could get Pence to go along, even if it was illegal, it might work. Meadows can describe the meetings where Trump pressured Pence, can testify about what Trump said, about how Trump reacted when Pence refused about Trump's state of mind and intent. And that testimony is crucial because it shows Trump wasn't just asking Pence to exercise legitimate authority, he was asking Pence to abuse his position, to violate the Constitution, to participate in an effort to overturn a legitimate election. And when Pence refused, when Pence said he didn't have that authority and wouldn't do it, Trump turned the mob against him. That's what the Hang Mike Pence chants on January 6th were about. Trump deliberately inflamed his supporters against Pence because Pence wouldn't help Trump steal the election, and Meadows witnessed all of that. Can testify to Trump's role in creating that danger for Pence. The legal theories prosecutors can now pursue are numerous. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. That's the crime of working with others to interfere with lawful government functions, and the fake elector scheme clearly qualifies. Trump and his co-conspirators tried to interfere with the electoral vote certification, tried to replace legitimate electors with fraudulent ones, all in an effort to change the outcome of a presidential election. That's conspiracy to defraud. And Meadows' testimony provides the evidence needed to prove it: wire fraud, using electronic communications to execute a fraudulent scheme. All those text messages and emails coordinating fake electors, that's wire fraud. Each message is potentially a separate count, obstruction of an official proceeding. The January 6th certification was an official proceeding. Trump's efforts to disrupt it, to delay it, to prevent it from happening, that's obstruction. And Meadows can testify to Trump's intent. To the fact that Trump knew he lost, but tried to prevent certification anyway, there are potentially charges related to the incitement of the January 6th riot, to Trump's role in gathering the mob, in directing them to the Capitol, in failing to stop the violence once it started. Meadows was with Trump during January 6th, knows what Trump was doing, what he was watching, what he said, whether he made any efforts to stop the violence or whether he was pleased it was happening. That testimony could support charges related to the riot itself. And then there are state-level charges. Georgia is already pursuing a case related to Trump's efforts to overturn results in that state. And Meadows' testimony about the broader conspiracy provides context for those state charges, shows they weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a coordinated national effort directed by Trump. The impact on Trump's co-conspirators is significant, because Meadows isn't just providing evidence against Trump, he's providing evidence against everyone involved in these schemes. Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Jeffrey Clark, all the lawyers and advisors who helped Trump try to overturn the election. Meadows can testify about their roles, about meetings they attended, about actions they took. And his testimony, combined with the documents he's providing, could result in charges against dozens of people. This is potentially the biggest political conspiracy case in American history, and Meadows is the star witness who ties it all together. The political implications are massive. Republicans are going to have to decide how to respond. Do they continue defending Trump even as his own chief of staff testifies he committed crimes? Do they claim Meadows is lying even though he has documents to prove what he's saying? Or do they finally distance themselves, start acknowledging that Trump did try to overturn the election and that it was illegal? That's a difficult calculation because Trump still controls a large portion of the Republican base, and those voters don't want to hear that their guy committed crimes. They want Republicans to defend Trump and attack prosecutors, but the evidence is becoming overwhelming. And at some point, even Trump's defenders are going to struggle to maintain the narrative that this is all a witch hunt. Democrats are going to use Meadows' testimony aggressively in campaigns, in congressional hearings, and public statements. They're going to say, look, Trump's own chief of staff confirms he tried to steal the election, confirms he knew he lost and tried to overturn it anyway. This isn't partisan speculation. This is testimony from someone who was there, who saw it all, who has documents to prove it. That's a powerful political argument. And it's going to be hard for Trump and his allies to counter, because Meadows was one of them, was part of the inner circle, and now he's confirming everything Trump's critics have been saying for years. The coming months are going to be crucial. Meadows' cooperation is still somewhat recent. Prosecutors are still using his testimony to build cases. Grand juries are still hearing evidence. Indictments are still being finalized. But the trajectory is clear. Trump is going to face serious federal charges related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And those charges are going to be backed by testimony from his own chief of staff, by documents from the White House, by evidence that proves Trump knew what he was doing was illegal and did it anyway. That's the kind of case that results in convictions. That puts people in prison. And everyone on Capitol Hill understands that. That's why they're erupting. That's why this is being treated as such a watershed moment. Because Mark Meadows just handed prosecutors everything they need to hold Trump accountable for attempting to steal an election. And there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Okay, so let's break this down into the key points, because there's so much here and we need to focus on what really matters. Point number one, Mark Meadows flipping is the single biggest development in the prosecution of Trump's post-election conduct. This isn't some peripheral figure. This isn't someone who had limited access or secondhand knowledge. This is Trump's chief of staff, the person who was with him constantly, who was in every meeting, who knew about every plan. And now he's cooperating fully with prosecutors. That changes everything, because insider testimony is incredibly powerful. When someone from the inner circle confirms the prosecution's theory of the case, when they provide firsthand accounts of criminal conduct, it becomes very difficult for the defense to create reasonable doubt. Meadows can testify about what Trump said and did, about Trump's intent, about whether Trump knew his actions were illegal. And that testimony coming from someone who was so close to Trump is devastatingly effective for prosecutors. The reason Meadows' cooperation is so significant is that it solves one of the biggest challenges in prosecuting Trump, which is proving intent. For most of these charges, prosecutors need to show Trump knew what he was doing was wrong and did it anyway. That's hard to prove with just external evidence. You can show what Trump did, but showing what he was thinking, what he knew, that requires insider testimony, and that's exactly what Meadows provides. He can testify that Trump was told by advisors there was no election fraud, can describe Trump's reactions to being told that, can show that Trump understood he lost but pursued illegal strategies anyway. That's proof of criminal intent. And without that proof, Trump's defense would be that he genuinely believed the election was stolen, that he was acting on honest belief rather than criminal intent. But Meadows destroys that defense, shows Trump knew better but acted criminally anyway. Point number 2. The documentary evidence Meadows is providing makes his testimony nearly unassailable. One of the risks with cooperating witnesses is that defense attorneys can attack their credibility, can suggest they're lying to get a better deal for themselves, can point out they have motivation to say whatever prosecutors want to hear. And to some extent, that attack will work with Meadows. Trump's lawyers will definitely argue that Meadows is making things up to avoid prosecution. But here's the problem for that defense strategy. Meadows isn't just testifying, he's providing documents. White House memos, meeting notes, text messages, email chains. All of this documentary evidence corroborates what he's saying, shows he's not making things up, shows the conspiracy really happened the way he describes. And you can't attack the credibility of documents. They are what they are. They say what they say. And if they show Trump discussing fake electors and pressuring Pence, that's proof, not speculation, not one person's word against another's actual proof. The combination of insider testimony plus documentary evidence is prosecutors' dream. It's the kind of case that's almost impossible to defend against because the documents show what happened. And Meadows can explain what the documents mean, can provide context, can describe the meetings where these documents were created, can connect the dots for jurors. That's why legal experts are calling this a game changer, because Meadows' cooperation doesn't just add one more witness. It transforms the entire case from something that relied on external evidence and inference into something that has direct insider proof of criminal conduct. That's the difference between a difficult case and an easy one, between something Trump might beat and something that's almost certain to result in conviction. Point number 3, the scope of potential charges is enormous and extends beyond just Trump. When prosecutors have evidence of a conspiracy as extensive as what Meadows is describing, they can charge everyone who participated, and we're talking about dozens of people potentially. All the lawyers who worked on the fake elector scheme, all the officials who participated in creating fake elector slates, all the people who coordinated pressure campaigns against state officials, everyone who was in meetings planning these schemes, everyone who took actions to execute them, all of them are now at risk of prosecution, and many of them are going to face a choice. Do they cooperate like Meadows and provide evidence against others, or do they fight the charges and risk serious prison time? That dynamic, where prosecutors flip lower-level conspirators to build cases against higher-level ones, that's how you prosecute complex conspiracies. You start with people who have the most exposure. You offer them deals to cooperate. They provide evidence against their co-conspirators. And gradually you work your way up the chain until you've got solid cases against everyone involved. Meadows cooperating is the biggest domino, but he won't be the last. Other people who were involved in these schemes are going to see that Meadows flipped, are going to see what kind of evidence he's providing, and they're going to make the same calculation. Better to cooperate and minimize my own sentence than to protect Trump and go to prison for years. So we're probably going to see more cooperators, more insiders providing testimony, more documents being turned over, and each one makes the case stronger, makes conviction more certain, makes it harder for anyone to defend their actions. The political damage this does to Trump is substantial even before any trials happen. The court of public opinion matters, and Meadows confirming that Trump tried to overturn the election, that Trump knew he lost but tried to steal it anyway, that's damning. It removes any fig leaf of legitimacy from Trump's post-election conduct. Removes the ability to claim he was just pursuing legitimate legal challenges, shows he was engaged in a criminal conspiracy. And that's going to affect how people view Trump, how they think about his claims that he's being persecuted, how they evaluate his fitness for office. Some people, Trump's hardcore base, won't be swayed. They'll claim Meadows is lying or was coerced. But for everyone else, for independents and moderate Republicans, this is evidence that's hard to ignore. Trump's own chief of staff saying he committed crimes. That's powerful. That's the kind of thing that changes minds. Republicans in Congress are in an impossible position now. They've been defending Trump for years, claiming the investigations are partisan witch hunts, claiming there's no evidence of wrongdoing. But Meadows' cooperation undermines all of that, because Republicans can't claim this is a partisan attack when Trump's own Republican chief of staff is confirming the charges. Can't claim there's no evidence when someone from the inner circle is providing detailed testimony backed by documents. So what do? Some will continue defending Trump no matter what, will attack Meadows as a traitor, will claim the documents are fake or taken out of context, will maintain the persecution narrative no matter how absurd it becomes. But others are going to start distancing themselves, are going to stop defending Trump's conduct even if they don't explicitly condemn it, are going to focus on other issues and try to avoid discussing Trump's legal problems. That fracturing of Republican support matters because it isolates Trump, makes him more politically vulnerable, makes it easier for prosecutors to move forward without facing overwhelming political blowback. The timeline for charges and trials is going to accelerate now. Meadows' cooperation gives prosecutors what they need. They don't have to keep investigating, don't have to keep trying to flip witnesses or gather evidence. They have it. Meadows and his documents provide the core of the case. So prosecutors can move to indictments, can present evidence to grand juries, can secure charges against Trump and his co-conspirators. We're probably looking at federal indictments within weeks or months rather than years. And once charges are filed, trials move forward relatively quickly by legal standards. So we could be looking at Trump on trial for election-related crimes within the next year, facing real prison time if convicted. And based on the evidence Meadows is providing, conviction seems likely. Not certain, nothing is certain in trials, but likely, very likely. The historical significance of this moment cannot be overstated. We're watching a conspiracy to overturn a presidential election being exposed and prosecuted in real time, with insider testimony from the people who participated, with documentary evidence showing what they planned and did. This is going to be studied for generations in law schools, in political science courses, in history classes, as an example of both how democratic norms can be threatened and how legal systems can hold perpetrators accountable. Mark Meadows' decision to cooperate is a pivotal moment in that story. The moment when the conspiracy became undeniable, when the evidence became overwhelming, when accountability became inevitable. And for Trump personally, this is catastrophic. His chief of staff, someone he trusted completely, someone who was supposed to be loyal forever, has turned on him, has provided prosecutors with everything they need to prove Trump committed crimes, has ensured that Trump will face trial and likely conviction. There's no spinning this as a positive, no way to claim victory. This is pure, unmitigated legal disaster for Trump, and he brought it on himself, because if Trump hadn't tried to overturn the election, if he'd accepted defeat and left office peacefully like every president before him, none of this would be happening. Meadows wouldn't have evidence of crimes because there wouldn't have been any crimes. There wouldn't be prosecutions because there wouldn't be anything to prosecute, but Trump couldn't accept defeat, couldn't let go of power, had to try every illegal scheme he could think of to stay in office. And now his own chief of staff is testifying about all of it, is providing the evidence that's going to send Trump to prison. The final point is this. Capitol Hill erupting over Meadows' revelations shows that even in our polarized political environment, there are still lines that can't be crossed without consequences. Trump tried to overturn an election, tried to steal the presidency, tried to subvert democracy itself. And now he's being held accountable, not just in the court of public opinion, not just in political discourse, but in actual courts, with actual charges, with actual possibility of prison time. That's the system working. That's democracy defending itself. That's the rule of law being enforced, even against the most powerful people. Mark Meadows providing the evidence to make that happen. That's significant. That's historic. That's the moment when Trump's attempt to destroy democratic norms met the reality that some institutions, some people, some evidence can't be ignored or overcome. And whatever happens in the trials, whatever the ultimate outcome, this moment matters. Capitol Hill erupting over Meadows' testimony, recognizing that the evidence is now undeniable, understanding that accountability is coming. That's the story. That's what makes this so important. And that's why this is going to be remembered as the turning point when Trump's criminal conduct finally caught up with him.